Hello, this is Our Money, a program on anti-corruption investigations. My name is Bihus, and today we will talk about military equipment sales. There's a state enterprise, Spets Export. It exports special equipment, well, military equipment. It also exports military equipment of private companies as an agent and receives commission pay. Well, we have noticed that some parts exported by the state company seem to come from nowhere. And you know, it is hard to get spare parts for fighter jets and attack helicopters out of nowhere. Now, Lesia Ivanova on magical military business. He works for pennies now as a spare hand. He was cruelly framed then. He already served his time for this. And do you know how the firm was registered to him? Well, he was drunk. He signed the documents. They took him there and he signed it. That's all. He sold his passport data, yes? For the money? Yes, yes. And he never had a business or something like that? God forbid, he is very poor. You can come in and take a look. He only has one TV and it doesn't work. It was turned off because he didn't pay for cable TV. I wasn't a part of the business. They just asked me to sign the papers for the money. But they said nothing about the firm or anything like that. They paid me about $30. UBC Group firm. Does he have a business? No. What does he do for a living? He works as a what's it called? With people who take a loan and do not pay for it. A debt collector? Yes. I needed money. I became like a co-founder, and then it was closed. All these questions other people asked me. I don't know anything about them. A lot of people from our neighborhood fell into the trap, so to say. He signed it drunk, and he didn't even know what he was signing. They gave him $7, and that was enough for him. You have just listened to 4 typical stories of fake business owners' lives. Usually, these stories are the same. People in a bad financial situation sign some papers. That's how they become co-founders and directors of fake companies. They don't get a lot of money out of this. They get a few dollars and a legal punishment when the police find them. Those who made them do it make much more money. They get a couple of $100 and no legal punishment, because the police usually don't get them. The beneficiaries of the fake companies get the most. They use the firms to launder millions. That's why they have the Ukrainian judicial system on their side. In 2015, a group of fake companies starts to sell equipment. They seemingly got spare parts for military aircraft from an unknown source. Il-38 planes, Su-30 fighters, and Me-type helicopters. Those parts on paper, they sell and supply to the Ukrainian Transport and Machine Building Company. UTMC is officially registered on British Tunbridge and on Cypriot Boldstodo. The official beneficiary is unknown. The thing is that in Ukrainian register, the last beneficiary is British. The British registry has a Latvian, and the Cyprus registry has a Cypriot. But in Ukraine, the firm's links lead to a famous businessman, Alexander Yurakov. For example, a part of the LIT Group firm, which was earlier headed by Yurakov, was registered on Tunbridge. For the last 10 years, the name of Alexander Yurakov has been heard in completely different schemes and sectors: railway cars, TV digital frequencies, and even the food from airport Borispol's vending machines. Yurakov claims that the UTMC doesn't belong to him. I am aware of the majority of the entities from your request because I provided them with legal services. But I have and never have had anything to do with business activities of those companies, in accordance with the instructions given by them. But today, the firm is represented in courts by Yurakov's personal attorney, Natalia Pismena. It was Pismena on whom UTMC's clone firm, Universal Transport and Machine Building Company, was registered. Until recently, its director was Yurakov himself. Moreover, when the tax authorities searched UTMC, they were looking not only for the place of the firm's official registration, but for the clone's office too, and they called it UTMC's undercover additional office. Then the out-of-nowhere parts are sent in two directions, either to state factories, but not for the jet fighters, or, in the jet fighter case, they get exported through the state-owned Spectechno Export. UTMC has a long story of cooperation with companies in the state defense sectors. For example, the firm sold spare parts for wheeled vehicles to tank factories. In the beginning of 2016, 4 military factories paid the firm $1.1 million. UTMC also cooperated with the state defense company Spectechno Export. It stocked up from UTMC for $1.2 million. It also serviced the company's export under the commission agreements. That's what happened in our story about fake firms and jet parts. What is a commission agreement? If I produce, let's say, mobile phones and I want to sell them abroad, I can do it in two ways. The first one is to do everything on my own, but it means a lot of papers, bureaucracy, customs. The second way is to hire a middleman to deal with all that stuff. In that case, I'll get the money for the contract and I'll pay the mediator a part, the so-called commission. When the subject matter is not just simple cell phones, but dual-use and military items, Spectechno Export usually is the middleman. This is another business in the structure of Ukrainian defense industry, Ukroboronprom. It specifically exports weapons and military equipment. In our case, the jet parts, allegedly bought from fake firms, are exported by UTMC, namely to the Indian aircraft company Hindustan. UTMC's export papers are done by Spectechno Export. Spectechno Export declined to talk to us about its cooperation with UTMC. They answered us with a short phrase: "We have been working for 6 years now. Everything else is confidential, and we think we know why." Perhaps it's not just about confidentiality of commercial contracts. There was a blank spot left in the story of fake firms and jet parts. Where did these parts come from in the first place? UTMC neatly exported them to India with the help of Spectechno Export. But where did the company find parts for military aircraft if its official suppliers are fake? Obviously, they didn't come out of nowhere. If the official version lacks credibility, there must be another unofficial one. Il-38 planes were produced in the USSR in the 1960s to 70s. Su-30 jet fighters have been made in Russia since the 1990s. Their basic model Su-27 began being produced in the 1980s in the USSR. So this is all about Soviet and post-Soviet aircraft. Military expert and General Staff ex-employee Reserve Colonel Oleg Zhdanov explains the phenomenon of parts' magical appearance in fake firms simply: the stocks of military forces. Today, the warehouses still have a huge amount of small spare parts. The age of those spare parts is somewhere around 50 years. The standard lifetime of those parts in the Soviet and Ukrainian armies is 25 years. After 25 years, you can safely write them off. So it turns out that on paper, the spare parts are written off. They are not registered, but in real life they are here, absolutely new, never used.
А в жизни они реально есть и абсолютно новые, не бывшие ни разу в эксплуатации.
Then you can sell the parts unofficially, of course, by laundering their source through fake firms and documents. Documents say that they're written off, utilized, or just thrown out. And to transfer them further to any firm, you have to legalize them. Consignment notes are written, but now without tracking the movement through the warehouses, displacements, and so on. Their materialization with the help of fake firms starts here. However, you cannot always track the origin of the parts. Large units like engines, chassis, remote controls can be identified by the serial number. Smaller details don't have this marker. From our sources, we know exactly what Spets-Techno experts sent to Hindustan in 2015 to 2016. These were mainly small parts, from pump relays to condensers, valves, and plugs. Everything that's listed here doesn't have a serial number. It is expendable. These details change when deteriorated. The Ministry of Defense won't give you any information about every warehouse's serial numbers. They're classified. The law enforcement agencies have not looked into the origin of these spare parts. Only the tax service has looked into UTMC's contracts with fake firms. But the courts didn't consider these contracts suspicious. So here's the point. An investigation showed that UTMC had cashed out almost $1.5 million and evaded taxes through fake firms. So fake firms were legally punished, while UTMC still has to pay some taxes. But this November, UTMC won an epic lawsuit against the tax police. Despite the fact that all its suppliers confessed that they were fake and were even punished, the court decided that it's not a probable cause to conclude that fake firms that never existed couldn't provide anything to UTMC. Moreover, all UTMC's documentation for that period was stolen by unknown people. That's a shame, and a very convenient one. Seriously, it is so annoying. Everyone understands that jet fighter parts can't appear out of nowhere, and if they were not produced new, they were clearly stolen from warehouses. From state warehouses, probably, because we're talking about jet fighters. And nobody cares that those warehouses are being robbed on an industrial wholesale export scale. These out-of-nowhere parts bring us back to last month's story. Then we talked about a group of suspicious traders who supplied those parts to tank factories. Let's quickly go over that story and see what happened next. Those who will steal from the army, I'll chop their hands off. It almost looks clean on paper. The Ministry of Defense orders vehicle repairs from the Kyiv Tank Factory. The factory buys spare parts, bridges, but from a middleman, not the manufacturer. The middleman buys them from other middlemen, which obtain it from further middlemen. In reality, there were no spare parts at the bottom of this scheme, but the money went somewhere. This residential building's ground floor has an office number 11, where the supplier of parts for Ukrainian APCs works, the Interstal Limited firm. No tanks, no spare parts, no APCs. Before our story happened, it even had a different name. It was the Optimum accounting firm. There's nobody here. These offices are empty. The money was transferred further down the chain to fake companies used to cash out money. They asked me to register it. They promised to pay me $35 a month. Just sign the papers, it's gonna be all right. Then the military prosecution got to the Kyiv Tank Factory. The ex-head of Optimum Spets Detail was interrogated. He said that the company wasn't involved in any economic activities, but was created with the sole purpose of embezzling the money allocated to strengthen the defense sector. But in a couple of days, the search warrant for Ukrokoronprom was just removed from the register. While the tax inspectors and prosecutors were investigating, Optimum Spets Detail continued accepting money from the tank factories. Let's start with the formal owner of Optimum Spetsdetal, Volodymyr Volokach, a nut too tough for military prosecutors. Unemployed, living with his mother in an old Khrushchevka. He hasn't worked for a long time, around 6 months. Let's take another look at the initial scheme. Two middlemen are on the same level, Volokach's Optimum Spetsdetal and Interstal, where he used to work before. The owner and permanent head of Interstal is Andriy Rohoza. Did those parts exist at all? Did you supply them? I don't understand these questions. You shouldn't ask me. Meet Vitaly Zhukov, a young talent in the defense sector of Ukraine. He's literally young. In 2012, Zhukov became a member of the supervisory board of Meridian, a huge defense factory in the structure of Ukroboronprom. He was only 23 years old then when he became an assistant to the head of the entire conglomerate. In 2014, Zhukov co-founded a trade company. His partner there is Andriy Rohoza. Vitaly Zhukov leaves home in his wife's car and drives to a restaurant. After he parks by the restaurant, Alexei Babich arrives to meet with him. The restaurant's cameras recorded both men entering the building and discussing something for around 30 minutes. What could Vitaly Zhukov and Alexei Babich be talking about? So, a partner of a co-founder of fake firms, which were used to embezzle money from tank factories, and a head of one of those factories, Zhytomyr Tank Factory, who transferred almost $2 million to the fake company. We discussed supply deliveries for KMDB. Vitaly Zhukov represented an unexpected employer during the negotiations. It was previously called Leninska Kuznia, and now it's Kuznia na Rybelskomu. The ultimate beneficiaries of the factory are President Petro Poroshenko and his closest comrade, Ihor Kononenko. Kuznia also supplies the Kyiv Tank Factory with parts, and to produce them, it buys other parts, allegedly from Optimum Spetsdetal as well. I can't name any specific firm which provides spare parts. Nevertheless, in 2016, Kuznia allocated to Optimum Spetsdetal a very specific amount of money, $268,000 for spare parts. During this investigation, we were begging both Ukroboronprom and the factories to comment on the situation, but they didn't. Suddenly, after the release of the story, the Kyiv Tank Factory invited us on a tour to convince us that we're wrong, they're right, everything is fine, and so on. And first of all, I'm very thankful both to Ukroboronprom Group and the factory for this invitation. You should have done it right away. And we asked the factory a very simple question. Were there the parts? Where did they come from? Where did they go? And does it all have any proof? You can see the T-64 tank in front of you. The head of Kyiv Tank Factory, Vadim Shkavro, gave us a personal tour. This vehicle came back from the ATO zone where it was damaged in combat. He showed us the condition of vehicles returned from the front line and how they are repaired. We removed the rusty layer completely. Its cover is now completely different. The vehicle came out of the shot blast machine and the development of new production lines on the factory. We tried to make APCs from scratch by ourselves, not out of an APC frame made in the 1970s to 1980s, but we make a whole new APC from scratch. We make the APC frame by ourselves. The factory's head assures every nut and its quality are under strict control. There is a mark on every plate. He assures us that the factory didn't and couldn't receive subpar spare parts because there is shipment control and quality control in place. That's how those infamous bridges are checked. That's how we test the noise of the differential. We place it there and start the test. We rotate it so it warms up to disperse oil over the bridge. Then, according to the procedure, we test its left and right sides. But any parts provided by Optimum and Renal couldn't be shown. Apparently, there aren't any left. It was a big Thai contract between Ukraine and the Royal Thai Army about the delivery of a certain amount of APCs, and now this contract was successfully completed in March 2016. We've asked if there were any papers about the part's origins left, because every part is shipped to the factory with its own passport. Turned out that there were no passports left, neither originals nor copies. And where are all the passports? Are they just gone with the documents? Of course, all vehicles are shipped away with their documents. All the documents of the spare parts have also gone to Thailand? Yes. You don't have any copies left? We have only a journal and the repair case. The shipment control journal looks like this, a simple handwritten ledger. And how is it organized? Here are the number of bridges and wheel gears, the number of orders. And these are all the available records? A handwritten journal? But you have seen the passport. The Journal of Shipment Control is kept. So you don't keep any copies? You don't have any electronic database for all this? No, because it is an original document. And how can I find here, for example, the bridges supplied by Optimum Spetsdetail? Let me repeat that. We had completed the Thai contract in March 2016. I heard you. So this is your original documentation, right? Yes, maybe. Information about the bridges supplied by Optimum Spetsdetail must be somewhere here. I'm sure if you're interested in those companies, you'll figure out how to find this information. Can you show it? But as soon as we start to insist on getting the information about Optimum's and Renal's shipments, the journal is quickly taken away from us by security. After all, we discover that in addition to the ledger, there is a shipment control paper for every delivery, but they don't have those either. They were taken away by the prosecutors. An interesting fact came up in the conversation. 45% of all components of BTR-3 until 2014 came from Russia. And Ukraine started to produce them not so long ago. They were developed very recently. Nobody was making them before at all. And then Lozovo Forging Mechanical Plant began producing them at the end of 2015, start of 2016. So Lozovo started to produce them around the end of 2015. Lozovo may have tried producing them before, but it certainly makes them now. But parts of the bridges still don't pass the check. The void between 2014 and 2016 is the time when these spare parts were supplied by Optimum. The factory's leadership pretended not to know where the spare parts came from at the time. And for a couple of hours, they tried to convince us that nobody needs to know this at all. Who was the manufacturer of the bridges supplied by Optimum? I can't remember now. And I don't even know who the manufacturer was. And I don't want to know, to be honest. You avoid the questions all the time. Nobody is avoiding anything. You don't answer at all. How can we know who the manufacturer is? What are you talking about? And why do we have to know? Because half an hour ago you told us that those bridges aren't produced in Ukraine. They weren't produced until 2016. Finally, the discussion at the factory reached the point that it's not important where anything came from. It did, and that's all. And it was of high quality. To confirm this, they show photos of them receiving the parts. We are ready to show you the arrival of the bridges to the factory. They admit that the notorious Optimum had its own sins. It sometimes was late on a delivery. Then it was asked to return the money. We aren't saying if the organization is good or bad. We're talking about facts now. They were late on a delivery. We banged on the table and demanded that they return the money, period. Our relationship ended. So the problem was in terms? Yes, only in terms. We did not fit in the terms they promised us. Allegedly, there were no other complaints. But actually, everything was not that good. Our sources gave us papers that show that Optimum and Renal were not guilty only of falling behind on deadlines. lines. They could also supply the factory with junk, only a small portion of which was usable. So the factory had to throw most of them out. And here is the most interesting thing. This is a service note from the shipment control. It is about spare parts, which were received in September 2015 from Renal. Levers, gears, axles, the exact same parts which were bought by Renal from Optimum, and on which the prosecution did not finish its investigation. Levers for the wrong APC can't be refit. Gears, half of which are also wrong, can't be refit because they can't even be tested. Bridges, also wrong, can hardly be refit, as they all have a malfunct differential. Oh, I think it sounds familiar. We test the left and the right sides of the differential. Well, in fact, this is scrap. It can't be used. According to the service note, these appliances are malfunct. It is clear that the spare parts like these couldn't be used in the Kyiv factory, or the APCs wouldn't be able to move. But why did they talk about the quality parts from an honest supplier if there wasn't any quality to them? Maybe because you can talk about the president's friends as of the dead. Nothing but good. So the parts were here, but they are away now. The papers are away. But the APCs are operational, so something was put in them, so everything is okay. And what exactly was put in them and where it came from is none of your business. It's military magic. And there's more. The Kyiv Tank Factory got very offended by us saying that those APCs were for the Ukrainian front. They claimed that those APCs were to be exported to Thailand, and we have to apologize. I don't see any fundamental difference, to be honest, but okay. We really made a mistake. Our apologies. And to Thailand, too. That's all for today. Write us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you have an interesting topic, feel free to email us. See you on air in a week. Goodbye.